Ocean Ranger, Jack, are you there?
Roger.
Can you give us anything else on it right now?
And we're listing badly, and we need to get the people off the rig, and that's about it. We may not be able to hold a rig, and the rig might be going over. Going about 70, anywhere 75 to 80 miles an hour, and we need to get the people off the rig.
On Valentine's Day, 1982, the largest semi-submersible oil rig in the world, the Ocean Ranger, is battered by a ferocious storm off the rugged east coast of Canada. After 12 hours, the giant rig topples. And 84 men face a desperate struggle for survival. This is the anatomy of the Ocean Ranger disaster. How a seemingly unsinkable marvel of technology disappeared. Taking the hopes and dreams of a community with her. It is a story of arrogance and complacency, told through the findings of 2 inquiries, the recollections of eyewitnesses, and the memories of those whose loved ones fought for their lives in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. (1982). The price of crude oil is near an all-time high. Higher prices mean higher rewards for those who search for oil. Their quest leads to the huge oil deposits beneath the floor of the North Atlantic. 170 miles off Newfoundland, Canada, are the Grand Banks, home of the Hibernia oil fields. The Ocean Ranger is one of 3 rigs on an exploratory mission seeking Hibernia's untapped wealth. A 1977 film produced by the rig's owner, Odeco, promotes the Ocean Ranger as a technological marvel.
The Ocean Ranger, the world's largest, most technically proficient, self-propelled, semi-submersible drilling platform, is a product of 10
Built in
years.
Japan 6 years earlier, at a cost of $125 million US, the Ocean Ranger has already served in the Gulf of Alaska and the North Sea. The giant rig is built to withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds and 110-foot waves.
The Ocean Ranger, now drilling in the Gulf of Alaska, is the most advanced semi-submersible in existence.
By February 1982, the Ocean Ranger is marking its 2nd winter off the Newfoundland coast. These are deadly waters. Fog, ice, and hurricane storms have claimed over 7,000 ships since Newfoundland was discovered in 1497. The water is shallow, only 260 feet deep below the rig. Waves crash against the continental shelf and become amplified. At 400 feet long, 260 feet wide, and 340 feet high, the Ocean Ranger is larger than a football field and taller than the depths of the ocean beneath her. She is considered unsinkable. More than half of the 84 men who work on the Ocean Ranger are Newfoundlanders. For the people of Canada's poorest province, the Ocean Ranger provides a rare chance to make decent wages. Anne-Marie Toohey's husband, Mel Freed, is the rig supply manager.
I don't think there were a lot of jobs around at the time, you know, and the jobs on the rigs, they paid well. They were hard to get.
And it was the grail to get good work offshore in the oil boom that was happening in the 1980s. It was everybody's dream job.
For teenager Craig Tilley, the rig offers a bright future.
He might have gotten close to $1,000 a week. I know he came in and he had all kinds of plans and dreams about what he was going to do and what he was going to buy out of all of his money.
The Ocean Ranger holds promise for many Americans as well. Men like Robert Hicks of South Carolina.
He didn't want to work at the shipyard and be gone down there so much he wouldn't see the children. So he said this way he could go to work like 28 days and be home with them, and he'd be able to spend more time with them.
The men of the Ocean Ranger know bad weather, but they also believe the rig can take it.
I've been in some high seas situations where the winds may have reached, gusted to 60, 70 miles an hour, and where the seas were 40 to 50 feet. The rig itself seemed to handle it well, and nobody seemed overly concerned.
It was a little tiny pinprick on the ocean. I saw it from the helicopter and I couldn't believe it, But then, of course, as the helicopter loomed up, this thing became this monolith, this huge, massive structure. Very imposing once you're on board it. It is big, but you're dealing with the ocean, which is way bigger.
Another oil rig, called the Zapata Ugland, is stationed 19 miles north of the Ocean Ranger. Derek Norman is the weather observer aboard.
The main responsibilities that I had as an ice weather observer was to collect weather data for the marine purposes, sea states, things that would affect the rig, deliveries to the rig, that sort of thing. Aviation weather, things that pilots need to know in order to land helicopters on the rigs.
The Ocean Ranger is a city at sea. Supply ships deliver drilling equipment, food, and medical supplies, with one vessel always standing by in case of an emergency. On February 14, 1982, that support ship is the Seaforth Highlander, under Captain Ronald Duncan. Eric Reese was a crewman on the Highlander.
You worked on a supply boat, there's always something different, like backing into a rig or something like that when it's a bit rough and that, and water beating over top of her. And it was enjoyable.
Aboard the Ocean Ranger, power and responsibility are shared in a complex hierarchy. Foreman Jack Jacobson, the representative of Mobil Oil, the company that leases the rig, is officially in charge. The rig's captain, Clarence House, coordinates all marine-based activities, such as moving from one location to another. But drilling supervisor Kent Thompson, known as the tool pusher, makes all the decisions concerning the drilling operation and has the real authority. On land, Merv Graham is Mobil's drilling superintendent, coordinating and overseeing the rig's activities. Work aboard the rig is demanding, an average of 21 consecutive 12-hour days, followed by 3 weeks off. But the men quickly become accustomed to the routine and the comfortable living conditions. There's even a pool table on board. Pat Ryan recalls the day her son Craig left in February 1982.
Well, I didn't drop him off. I had a bad back, and he just yelled out to me in the morning at 6:30. He said, "Mom, I'm on my way." I said, "Okay, see you in 3 weeks." And off he went.
On the morning of February 14th, the Ocean Ranger is drilling her 4th well on the Hibernia oil fields. As an exploratory rig, Her job is to discover wells, drill test holes, and then move on. It is an expensive process, and the overriding attitude is time is money. As a result, safety drills are given short shrift.
They'd ring the alarm, and people would file from their respective locations out to the lifeboat, stand around, have a cigarette, and shoot the shit. And then someone would climb in the lifeboat and do a perfunctory something or other to it, and then that was a lifeboat drill.
To maintain her tight schedule, the rig's drilling platform must be kept stable at all times. Like a submarine, the Ocean Ranger uses water and air to maintain proper height above the ocean. To lower the rig, water is pumped into the pontoons. When air is pumped in, the platform rides higher. The rig stability is maintained in the ballast control room, located in one of the columns. On Valentine's Day, 1982, Donald Rathbun mans the ballast control room. Like most of the men aboard, he has had on-the-job experience only, no formal training. The ballast control system is believed to be easy to operate.
In the drilling system, you simply push buttons. You know, when things are running. And one could assume that for ballast control, you simply did the same thing. If you want to control the operation of pumps, you push the button for the pump. If you want to operate the valve, you push another button for the valve. How difficult can it be? As long as things go right, things are not very difficult at all.
Sunday morning. In the Newfoundland capital city of St. John's, Mobil's drilling superintendent Merv Graham receives a bulletin. A fierce winter storm is racing up the U.S. East Coast.
This looks like a bad one, though.
Sure does. Getting heavy tonight. Here's a storm system about center, way out in here, but the snow pattern's hanging right along the coast. That is going to zip rapidly out to sea.
By 11 a.m., the storm hits Newfoundland and heads out to sea, toward the 84 men on the Ocean Ranger.
It was really stormy, windy, but you know, still, even with it being really stormy, I didn't think about the rig, you know, I thought the rig was safe in a storm.
Sunday afternoon, February 14th, 1982. In St. John's, Mobil's drilling superintendent Merv Graham leaves his office.
Give me a call as soon as the forecast.
The Atlantic storm is gaining intensity. But Graham sees no need to take action. He is confident that the Ocean Ranger can ride it out. "4:30 p.m. 19 miles north of the Ocean Ranger, the Zapata Ugland, a much smaller rig, initiates safety precautions. She hauls up her drill. Derek Norman aboard the Zapata Ugland recalls the storm's ferocious assault.
It's going to be a big one. So when I got on shift, the weather was pretty fierce. It was pretty well full tilt storm by the time I got on shift at 6. You know, I knew that we're in for a pretty miserable night.
With winds approaching 100 miles per hour, tool pusher Kent Thompson aboard the Ocean Ranger orders the men to disconnect from the well. But the force of the gales makes this impossible to do. In the ballast control room, just 27 feet above the sea, Donald Rathbun makes a visual check that the rig is still riding level above the waves. Despite the severe weather conditions, he is satisfied that the Ocean Ranger is still holding steady. "6:47 p.m. With conditions worsening, Thompson is forced to take drastic measures. He orders that the drill pipe be sheared off, a procedure that the Ranger has done only once before in severe conditions. On the nearby rig, Derek Norman braves the fierce storm to check weather instruments.
I mean, you look at it and you go, holy cow, you got to look up. You look up and you see a mountain above you. And, you're up on top of it, and then you look down and there's a Grand Canyon of water down there. It was wild. It's like something you just got to see it. Just got to see it to know it.
"7:45 p.m. A giant wave hits the Ocean Ranger. The force of the wave smashes the glass porthole and floods the room. The metal safety shutters have not been secured.
And these portholes could be closed with steel shutters that are clamped over the porthole. Now you have a situation where the water starts blasting against your windows. And then you say, oh, that's kind of dangerous, and let's shut these various shutters that we have to make sure that these windows don't get broken.
The instrument panels are not insulated. Live electricity courses through the panel.
The water does nasty things. It does cause short circuits in the various switches. You touch the board and you get a big shock. You may smell some acrid smoke from these sparks that are flying around. This is very, very scary and very, very dangerous.
The public address system is knocked out.
Hello. Hello.
Rathbun uses the walkie-talkie to contact tool pusher Kent Thompson.
This is
These open radio communications allow others to hear the evening's dramatic events as they unfold. Derek Norman is one of those listening in. Later, the inquiries into the disaster will use these transmissions to help piece together the sequence of events.
The first radio traffic that started to come from the Ocean Ranger that seemed a little bit out of the ordinary was somewhere around after supper. And it was the company man on the Ocean Ranger looking for the company man on our rig. So we knew something was not right.
Advised of the situation, tool pusher Kent Thompson sends down a mop-up crew. When the men arrive, the panel's indicator lights are flashing. They mistakenly believe that the rig's portside pontoon valves are opening and closing on their own. This would cause water to flood the ballast tanks and the rig to list. They cut the power, take out the wet switches, and rinse them to remove the salt water.
If there's salt water, get some fresh water, wash these things. Then you could dry these with a hair dryer, or you can dry these switches out, put them back in position, and then they work as they always had worked.
Update as to what's going on down there, over.
A crewman tells Thompson that the cleanup is going well, creating a temporary sense of calm.
Keep me informed, over.
Will do. Over and out.
Foreman Jack Jacobson calls the Seaforth Highlander to check that the ship is weathering the storm. Captain Ronald Duncan will later testify that Jacobson gave him no indication that the Ocean Ranger was in any trouble. Merv Graham in St. John's will also later testify that Jacobson told him that everything was under control. Pat Ryan remembers thinking of her son Craig at sea during the storm.
I remember I was walking around Topsail Pond, and I remember saying to a friend of mine at the time, I said, if Craig hadn't told me how safe it was on that rig, I'd be worried to death about him out there tonight. But I really didn't worry because he assured me it was so safe.
With the rig's telephones engaged, Mel Freed is unable to put in a Valentine's Day call to his wife.
A little bit surprised that no roses have been ordered, right? I was a bit offended by that. But anyway, and then there was no phone call. I was really surprised, actually. He's never forgotten any event like that ever before. He's always been so thoughtful, you know, but it was obvious there must have been something wrong then, that they were just trying to deal with it then.
At 12:30 a.m., power is finally restored in the ballast control room. But the system, damaged by salt water, short circuits, and the pontoon valves open. Water rushes into the ballast tanks. The rig begins to list forward. Rathbun now knows that something is terribly wrong. To close the valves, he cuts off the power to the control panel again. But it is too late. The Ocean Ranger is now 10 degrees off balance. The only course of action is to try to pump the water out. But the designers of the Ocean Ranger have not anticipated this kind of emergency. They have installed pumps in the rear of the pontoons only. The pumps only work when the rig is level. If the rig is listing forward, the water is trapped.
As long as things are level, as long as the rig is level, no problem at all pumping out of any of the tanks. Once it gets down a ways, the water has to go up a long hill now in order to be pumped out. There's too much of a difference in the elevation. Then the pump cannot pump up the water from the bow.
Okay, we'll try that. Stand by.
Rathbun tries everything, but he still can't get the pumps to work.
Still not working. Already tried that.
No alarms have yet been sounded. Most of the men aboard the Ranger are still unaware of the growing crisis. But in the ballast control room, panic is rising. The men try to force the valves to close by manually overriding the system.
It's a complex system if you don't know how these things work, and then you simply guess at what might happen if you push this, pull that, which is sort of a last resort effort, which you don't really want to get into, but what else can you do now?
It is a desperate tactic and a tragic mistake, as it causes more valves to open, not close. Water rushes in, increasing the list. Then, a critical blow. The anchors that keep the rig stable have cables that run through the deck into the columns. Water floods in, increasing the list even further.
It's a desperate situation. It exponentially works as each wave goes by. The water gets into the chain lockers and they fill up. That will be the final straw.
1 a.m. Foreman Jack Jacobson calls Mobil's Merv Graham at home to tell him they are in serious trouble. Graham takes immediate action. He alerts the Coast Guard, helicopter rescue crews, and all ships in the area. Aboard the Zapata Ugland, Derek Norman listens as the drama unfolds.
She had developed a list of some degrees, which was considered to be a danger. So they made efforts to correct it, and I know that there was discussions going on between all the rigs and the Ranger and town about the ways to do this. Our ballast control operator, who was a very stoic Norwegian fellow, was shaking his head, and he said, "They're goners."
1:05 a.m. With the list now at 15 degrees, radio operator Ken Blackmore calls the Seaforth Highlander for help. Rescue helicopters are unable to take off because of the storm. The Seaforth Highlander is at least an hour away. It is now a race against time.
The fellow was on watch after me. He come busting into the cabin. I figured there was something wrong with us. And then he snows, Osh Ranger.
All hands on deck. The Ranger's in trouble. Move, move. What's going on?
The Seaforth Highlander is the only hope to save the crew of the biggest floating oil rig in the world. (1:10 a.m.) The Ocean Ranger is in a severe list, and the nearest help an hour away. Ken Blackmore makes the seaman's ultimate plea for help. On the nearby rig, Derek Norman listens helplessly.
It was just an event unfolding. Something terrible is happening, but without having a realization of just how terrible it could be. And the worst case scenario is that the rig sinks and nobody survives.
Merv Graham's office relays the Mayday call. An alarm is sounded on the Ocean Ranger. The men now know they must abandon the rig. But as the safety drills were never seriously practiced, the procedure is unfamiliar.
What did he say?
1:30 a.m. Ken Blackmore informs Mobil's base in St. John's that they are taking to the lifeboats. It is the last transmission from the Ocean Ranger. A former crew member can only imagine the terror of that moment.
Your whole world basically is going out from underneath your feet. And you're on a list, and then you're trying to make your way uphill across a steel deck, keeping in mind, of course, that it's a vicious storm, and get to the location. And then actually have the presence of mind or focused on that to get in the lifeboat, and then even to be able to launch it. I mean, I don't know how they were able to achieve it.
The inquiries into the disaster will later surmise that with only 2 working lifeboats and no survival suits, the crew must have evacuated the rig in a state of panic. Some may have even leapt directly into the icy waters. They would have survived for only a few minutes before succumbing to hypothermia. At 2:11 a.m. More than an hour after receiving the desperate call for help, the Seaforth Highlander is at last within visual range of the Ocean Ranger. Captain Duncan sees a faint cluster of lights. They are empty life jackets whose lights have been activated by contact with salt water. Moments later, there is a distress flare from a lifeboat. Duncan navigates closer, trying not to crash into the much smaller boat.
Yes, sir.
The men of the Highlanders scramble onto the deck and into the blinding fury of the storm.
I mean, you only just got out on deck, and once the wave come over and you were soaking wet and it was cold and it was freezing spray and freezing snow and freezing everything out there then. And you couldn't see that good anyway. The stuff would almost cut your eyes out. It was just like knives going through your face half the time.
Duncan, showing extraordinary seamanship, maneuvers even closer to the lifeboat.
It was hard to say how far it was away, because like I say, one minute she was up above you, next minute she was down below you, so you knew what it was.
Without harnesses or safety lines, the men of the Seaforth Highlander put their own lives at risk as they prepare for a heroic rescue. February 15th, 1982. In St. John's, Anne-Marie Toohey awakens well before dawn.
I woke up really early that morning and I was worried. I don't know why. I didn't connect it with the rig or anything like that. I was just worried.
2:32 a.m. The Seaforth Highlander has just minutes to save the men in the lifeboat from freezing to death. Captain Duncan struggles to keep close to the lifeboat.
They had minimal equipment on the Seaforth Highlander, other than that life rings and inflatable life rafts that they could deploy. There was no rescue nets. I mean, it would take an incredible amount of seamanship to be able to navigate a ship tossing around in those seas.
If a line can be attached to the lifeboat, the crew of the Highlander might be able to pull it to safety. But in savage winds, their effort is dashed.
We were throwing ropes out to them, and the first time that it was blowing too hard, the ropes wouldn't make it. So that's when we tied life rings onto it. So when we slung them out, buddy was there, and we told him to make it fast, and that's what he did.
A rescue seems imminent. But as the men begin to evacuate, they shift too much weight to one side of the lifeboat.
Because, I mean, it was only a little opening. And when they all come out, you just all come out on the one side, and I thought she was full of water. And once everybody come out, you just flip right over and bust the rope, and that was it.
Now, there are mere minutes to rescue the men from the icy Atlantic.
They were screaming and singing out, but I tried not to listen. I mean, you try to help, but you try not to listen what was going on there.
2:38 a.m. One last desperate chance. The men of the Seaforth Highlanders sacrificed their own survival raft. But the ropes securing it in its cradle are frozen. Precious seconds are lost cutting it loose. When the raft is finally launched, it blows right past the freezing men. They are too cold and weak to grab onto it.
We were right next to the side of the ship. So the name of the ship was 3 feet high. Well, there's only 3 feet down, and there they were. It was not like they were 3 feet out away from the ship. They were right next to the Seaforth Island.
One man in the water is almost saved, but he is unable to keep hold of his rescuer's hand. Time has run out.
One minute they're there, next minute they're gone, and the waves are beating over you, and there was nothing we could do, not a thing.
"3:15 a.m. The Ocean Ranger, thought to be invincible, topples into the sea.
This is the mobile command base.
20 minutes later in St. John's, Merv Graham receives a staggering bulletin. The Ocean Ranger has disappeared beneath the waves.
Thank you.
Early morning, February 15th. The fury of the storm has passed. Relatives receive no calls from mobile. They learn about the disaster from the morning radio.
And it was working about 300 kilometers off St. John's in the Hibernia oil field area. It was hit by the same storm that slammed the eastern coast of Newfoundland yesterday. Reports from the scene say a lifeboat was launched and capsized. The tugboats and at least 2 helicopters are on the scene looking for the capsized boat. So far, there's no word from the scene on the fate of the people in the lifeboats.
Many of the families of the men aboard refuse to believe the worst.
And the next morning, for some reason, I turned the radio on at 6:30, and then my whole life changed. I heard the rig had gone down, and I just figured that he was, I said, oh, he's going to be okay, because he's tall and he's strong. He's going to get off of it.
I thought, no, Mel's never going to get into that sort of situation. He wouldn't be foolish enough to jump into the water, you know, and that wouldn't happen. He'd be safe. I was sure he'd be safe.
As the day wears on, optimism turns to despair, and then outrage.
Angry? Oh, yeah. I told him if they didn't bring his body back to me, I'd take a baseball bat to him. I think that was being angry.
As the day's events unfolded, I became mad and angry and certainly less than capable of carrying on a conversation. It was just, mostly a burning anger at these people. This is criminal. There should be a criminal investigation into how this happened.
At a hastily called news conference, the full extent of the horror is revealed.
It's my very, very sad duty to tell you officially the Ocean Ranger is lost. There were 84 people aboard, and at this point in time, we certainly cannot hold out much hope for survivors.
The Ocean Ranger should have been able to withstand the gale force winds and 50-foot seas that lashed the area. It did not. The newspaper headline details the shocking result. Both oil company and Canadian Forces rescue aircraft were dispatched to the area almost immediately. They returned at mid-morning, and the news was grim.
We came across a couple of bodies, so we attempted to lower one of our pararescue, our rescue specialists, down in the water. We got him down in, and he was able to confirm that the fellow was dead.
I mean, we all stayed up all through the night the next day, and we stayed out there 7 days after that. They already asked us to come back in, and Captain Douglas said no. He said, we'll stay. Doesn't mean the rig was gone. That was our rig, so I guess we had to stay.
May Donlan prays for good news about her missing husband Tom and her brother, Robert Hicks.
I was like a zombie. I just waited for the phone to ring and tell me that, you know, they had found Tommy or they had found my brother. But I didn't get the phone call. The phone call that I got was that they'd given up the search, and I didn't want them to do that.
This morning, at Pier 17 in St. John's Harbor, rescuers carried ashore the bodies of 5 more crewmen from the Ocean Ranger. The number recovered now stands at 20 and unlikely to go higher, because the official search for the remaining 64 has been called off.
In all, 22 bodies will be recovered. Pat Ryan's son is one of them.
I understand that he was still strapped in his life raft, fully clothed, and, you know, like, I think he was in, he didn't have a mark on him. They said that if he had been wearing a survival suit, he would have made it.
Mike Bromley would have been another victim, but he was on a training course in Texas. His colleague and close friend Tom Hatfield was not so lucky.
A friend of mine came up to me in the grocery store and said, "You're alive." I said, "Yeah, I'm home," you know, and Tom didn't make it back, you know, and it took me a while to get the grief through, and it gave me nightmares for quite some time, but it was a rude awakening.
"84 men dead and many more lives shattered. The search for answers now begins." February 19th, 1982. In St. John's, a devastated community honors its dead and demonstrates its solidarity in the face of the terrible tragedy. The twisted wreckage of the Ocean Ranger lies at the bottom of the North Atlantic. With the demand for answers building, the American and Canadian governments initiate official inquiries into the causes of the disaster. The American inquiry is held first in Boston. It is attended by Canadian Chief Justice Alex Hickman, who will head up the second inquiry in St. John's, Newfoundland. The American inquiry will take 2 months to issue its findings. The Canadian inquiry, almost 2 years.
I noticed that I left the room every time something was mentioned about it. If it came on the TV, I just couldn't listen to what happened. I know what happened. It took Mel, and that's all that really mattered.
All rise.
The picture emerging from the Hickman inquiry is one of clumsy lines of authority and channeling of information that may have hampered rescue attempts during the Ocean Ranger disaster.
The Canadian inquiry issues 136 recommendations to prevent future tragedies. Among them are the need for rig design changes, lifeboats for double the crew, and better training. Over time, a number of key recommendations are implemented, but many concerning evacuation and occupational safety are still not legislated.
In 1982 and even today, the NOS had government requirements for a training program. People learn, they learn on the job. What would happen is that somebody would be put in that position and there would be a training program where these people would learn from each other.
For many, the inquiries only confirm what they already knew. The Ocean Ranger was a disaster waiting to happen.
Most people didn't think it was a very safe rig, you know. I mean, it had the nickname Ocean Danger long before the disaster.
In those days, safety was a dirty word, I think. It was safety by default. You know, in other words, you idiot, don't stick your finger between the two sections of pipe when they're being put together because you won't have any fingers.
All we had were life jackets, and there were no immersion suits or survival suits, as some people refer to it. There was no actual instruction on how, you know, you were to get into lifeboats, how you were to strap yourself in or whatever.
The sheer size of the Ocean Ranger had created an attitude of arrogance and invincibility.
This hard-nosed tool pusher was trying to dominate the safety meeting, by saying, this rig can't sink. He didn't say it, he more yelled, this rig can't sink! You know, this is the biggest semi-submersible in the world. And there was laughs and guffaws, mostly from fishermen who had been on the water way longer than this guy had.
Once the full story of the Ocean Ranger disaster is known, a terrible realization emerges. The deaths of the 84 men aboard could have been prevented. 20 years after the tragedy, the bitterness endures.
I guess when you're a mother, it's a whole different story, you know? You just, you know, I felt like they killed my child. And I can't help it, I always felt like they were murderers.
I'm a firm believer in the fact that everything happens for a reason. And for some reason, I lost my husband on the Ocean Ranger. It hurts, and it hurts hard.
It changed my life, the direction of my life, changed my view of death. I mean, it was a very hard thing to see a lot of the faces that I knew go down. I mean, they're dead, they're gone. It's just too bad it had to happen.
The names of the dead are etched on a monument in St. John's. But the men who lost their lives aboard the Ocean Ranger and the hope that the giant rig gave them are gone forever. Lost in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. The sea has no memories and no remorse.
If you drink it, you die. If you fall into it, you die. And if you spend your life working on it, you die. So that's it, poison with it.
The Ocean Ranger disaster has taught us that neither our most advanced technology nor our grandest dreams can conquer the power of the sea.
Good evening. The biggest oil rig in the world, the rig called Ocean Ranger, is lying at the bottom of the sea. It collapsed and sank off the coast of Newfoundland in a fierce Atlantic gale. Missing and presumed drowned are 84 people, the Ranger's entire crew. 10 bodies have been sighted, but no survivors have been found. We have several reports, the first from Barbara Yaffe.
The Ocean Ranger. This is the oil rig that disappeared into the Atlantic Ocean sometime early this morning. It's a floating platform about the size of a football field anchored to the sea bottom. It first suffered listing problems last week. When it went down today, the 84 men on board took to 3 lifeboats. It's unlikely that any of them survived. The Ocean Ranger was one of 3 rigs working this winter off Newfoundland's east coast, drilling on the Hibernia site. It's a rough environment, and it was in the middle of a wicked winter storm that the rig capsized today. Helicopters were at the site of the disaster within a few hours. The helicopters were sent from armed forces bases around the east coast and were later joined by fixed-wing aircraft. Supply boats have also been searching the area for survivors. The only first-hand reports on the disaster have come from these search crews.
We saw a few bodies, and we continued our search. A couple of life rafts were overturned, and as the search went on, myself and the other helicopter, we came across various mounts of debris and a few other bodies and life rafts.
Was there any sign of life there?
Not that we could see, no.
You tried to make a rescue. You tried to pick up one of the bodies. What happened?
It wasn't a rescue. The first body we came upon, we tried to lower a SAR-tech down to see if he can, see if there's any life, and we put him in the water, but the waves are about 40, 50 feet, and he was close enough to ascertain that there was no life. The fellow was dead, and he was fully dressed in his immersion suit and had a life vest on, and we attempted to recover, but it was too dangerous for our SAR-tech, so we brought him back in, continued our search for possible survivors.
Mobil Oil, the rig's operator, hasn't been able to explain why the rig went down.
We really have very few details. We just know that we were contacted early in the morning, that the men had gone to their lifeboats. We then we dispatched 2 helicopters to the area. We have sighted 2 of the lifeboats and a life raft. We have not yet located the rig.
The province plans to hold a full inquiry into this tragedy. Right now, there are very few answers and a great many questions. And tonight, for the relatives of those people who were working aboard the Ocean Ranger, all there is the agony of hoping against hope. Barbara Yaffe, CBC News, St. John's.
As night fell along the Newfoundland coast, the search for survivors and bodies was suspended. Families of the rig workers remained silent, as though by some miracle there would be survivors. Of the 84 people on board, about 54 are from Newfoundland. 20 are from other provinces and 10 are Americans. But tonight, while people wait, there are serious questions being raised about the safety of the Ocean Ranger and evidence it had a brush with disaster last week. The rig had a record of accidents to the extent that members of the crew developed a very low opinion of it.
Call it the Ocean Danger. It was pretty well common knowledge that people call it that. It's been called that for over a year now anyways. The Ocean Danger.
A week ago, St. Aubin was on the Ocean Ranger when something went wrong with the ballast, and it developed a severe list to one side.
We had an abandoned boat alarm, and we went to the boat stations, but what happened was that the people on the low side of the rig, in case the rig tilted over on that side, they left their stations and came up all to the one station. So we had approximately 63 people that showed up at that boat station, and the boat is only supposed to hold 50. And there were also not enough life preservers. There were about 10 people walking around without life preservers. And also, we were there for about 10 minutes, and during that time, they couldn't start the boat on the motor. Start the engine on the lifeboat.
But at a news conference tonight in St. John's, Mobil insisted that its safety measures are up to standard.
I've heard comments on lack of safety procedures on the Ocean Ranger, which surprises me, because we do watch these. To my knowledge, the safety procedures were adequate.
But in recent weeks, there is growing evidence that safety has been a concern all the way around. The provincial government has been scrambling trying to put in place some safety legislation, although there's been no move yet to suspend drilling on 2 other rigs operating in the same area, rigs that rode out last night's storm. And the federal government also appears concerned. 2 weeks ago, it put an inspector on board the Ocean Ranger, and while there is no hint of what his report may contain, it will no doubt form an important part of the lengthy investigation that will now follow. Whit Fraser, CBC News.